Hello folks, so this is another update. We had a bit of a bad start to this morning. Woke up this morning, had a look at the camera, saw one sheep wasn't moving, went to investigate it and we had a prolapse. Unfortunately it happened in the middle of the night when none of us were available to catch it, so the sheep unfortunately died. But as I've mentioned before, when you're dealing with livestock, you get dead stock. You just have to deal with these things and get on with it. So what is a prolapse? Basically, a prolapse is where the sheep thinks it's lambing, but it doesn't open up. So then it continues to push and push and push, and it basically pushes its insides out. It's as grim as it sounds. Now, prolapses vary in severity. Sometimes you can find a sheep which might have just pushed part of its cervix and its womb out, and it'll have been running around all night, and you'll catch it and you can bring it in, push the prolapse back in, and then put a harness on it, and it'll keep it in. Sometimes though, like in the severe cases, which we think had happened in this case, is they can, instead of just pushing a small amount of the cervix and womb out, they pushed quite a lot out, and then they kept on pushing. If we'd have caught it early enough, we could have done something about it, but because it happened in the middle of the night, there was no chance. I mean, it's impossible to monitor these sheep 24 hours a day. We need to get to bed, we need to get to sleep and rest, so it's just impossible to catch everything 100% of the time. However, if you do catch them, like I say, you can actually push the prolapse back in, and it's kind of weird to do because the prolapse can be about the size of a small football, and there's a lot of pressure, and you have to have two hands on it to try and put it back inside the sheep, and you'll be pushing, and you have to put a scary amount of pressure on it. Then all of a sudden, it slots back in. Once you get it part way in, it just all kind of slots into place. But however, if you just left it like that, once you'd leave the sheep, it'd push it all back out again. The best way to describe it is it's kind of like squeezing a football through a cat flap. All of a sudden, it just gets to a point where it all slots back into place. And then what you do is you can either put a paddle in them, or what we prefer to use is a prolapse harness. We actually had a prolapse happen earlier this year, earlier this lambing season, which we caught. And we have the culprit here. As you can see, she has like kind of a harness on, and it goes around the back end, and that keeps everything in place. They can actually lamb through those harnesses, and once you get the paddle and the harness back in, the sheep just stops until it's lambing time. They can either lamb through the harness, or when you see them actually lambing, and you'll know it's a lambing because there should be a water bag present and slime gunk at the back end of the sheep. Then you can take the harness off. But in the case of the death this morning, what happens is they push everything out, and then the skin covering the womb and the cervix and everything splits, and once it splits, there's nothing you can do. The trouble is the tissue for the cervix and the womb and everything else is very, very thin. So you can't stitch it back. Once it's ripped, unfortunately, that sheep either dies or you have to euthanize it or put it down. There's just nothing there's no way of repairing it, unfortunately. But this morning, like I say, we came out and she was already dead. So it's probably happened between 2 and 4. These strange things, prolapses. Sometimes, like I say, you can have a sheep, they might push part of the womb and cervix out, and then be running around all night with it, and you'll see it in the morning, and be able to do something about it. And then other times it just happens really quick. But again, that's what it's like dealing with animals and nature. No two things are ever alike, and it's never a black and white situation. There's always a lot of variance and variables. What causes prolapses? Well, there's lots of different variables which cause prolapses. The bigger the sheep, the more likely it is to prolapse. It's not always the case though. Age can be a factor. Or if you have a flock which has predominantly old sheep, they're more likely to prolapse. The weather can make a difference. If you have a very mild, wet winter, fairly warm temperatures for winter and everything, the sheep don't burn brown fat. So there's more pressure on the womb and everything, so it's more likely to trigger a prolapse. If you get some nice cold weather, which has been happening now, lots of minus temperatures and snow on the ground and everything, that's actually better for them because it's drier, they're not getting stressed, and they burn more brown fat, which takes the pressure off the internal organs and off the womb. So yeah, there's lots of different things. Some of you might be watching this and thinking, well, why don't you just keep the sheep thin? because if you don't feed the sheep enough, they will be more likely for other illnesses to happen. Twin lamb being the most obvious one. Twin lambs where there is a lack of calcium and a lack of glucose and other sugars, and the lambs aren't getting enough nutrients from the sheep, so the sheep goes into a catatonic state, and that can kill the sheep as well. It is fairly easily treatable, is twin lamb, but it's not something you want happening, because as well as the sheep suffering, you will end up with small lambs which will be harder to keep alive, and more weak lambs, and that's going to give you a different set of problems. See, there's like a fine balance between having your sheep healthy, but then not having them too big, and it's like a Goldilocks area where you just where they need to be just right. But again, you can't really apply that throughout the flock because all sheep are different. I mean, some individuals are a bit greedier than others. Some can eat faster than others, some eat slower. It's just, when you're dealing with 130 sheep, you can't make them all exactly the same. There's always a degree of variance. So, you're always going to have these unexpected events happening. It's just part and parcel of breeding sheep. It's just biological variance. So that's it anyway. I won't film the sheep because or show you it because it's a bit gruesome. I'm not trying to make these videos to shock people, but I just want to show you the highs and lows of this job, because it's not all happy skipping lambs. You have death and complications and illnesses to deal with when you're doing the job. It's just the fleas that come with the dog. Anyway, I hope you found this video interesting. Remember to like and subscribe. And if you know anyone who might be interested in these videos, send them a link or just share it with them. So thanks a lot, and I'll see you in the next video.